release and I let go. You know my favorite line in that song? No more struggle, no more strife. Can we affirm that together for 2012? Let's say that. No more struggle, no more strife. One more time, people. No more struggle, no more strife. And so it is. I affirm not only happiness for 2012, but a struggle-free year. Amen? Amen. Right. I have been so excited to begin this year-long series. Just so you know, all my years of ministry, I have never attempted a year-long series. It's a little exciting, and it's a little scary, right? I mean, seriously, guys, one of the joys and challenges of ministry is really, you know, we have a basic message, and we have to make it fresh, exciting, and new 52 times a year, right? So here I go picking one topic for an entire year. But I think it is such a worthy and relevant topic for so many people right now. And that is why we, for the next 12 months, for all of 2012, are going to be exploring happiness. What is it? What causes it? What gets in the way of it? And how can we increase it in our lives? There's been a ton written and researched about happiness. One of my favorites is The Art of Happiness by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, lest anyone think that the pursuit of happiness is a frivolous pursuit. To a book called The Pursuit of Happiness, The Conquest of Happiness, Happiness and Economics, The How of Happiness, The Happiness Hypothesis, Authentic Happiness, and I love this one, Stumbling on Happiness, to name just a few. Heck, our founding fathers even referred to the importance of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. It was so perfect that the Daily Word was free. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And so we're going to say all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's in the Declaration of Independence. It has been said that this sentence is one of the best-known sentences in the English language and one of the most potent and consequential words in American history. And I would assume that it was labeled that ostensibly because of its first assertion, that all people are created equal. Because now, just as in 1774, all people are not treated as equals. So those words are as relevant now as they were then. But notice that right up there with equality and life and liberty is the pursuit of happiness. This is a significant recognition on the part of the creators of our country that happiness is important. Aristotle agrees. He taught that happiness is the meaning and the purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Now, come on, that's Aristotle. That has a little weight, don't you think? And Epicurus wrote, we must exercise ourselves in the things which bring happiness, since, if that be present, we have everything. And if that be absent, all our actions are directed toward attaining it. Isn't that interesting? It's also significant that we begin our journey toward happiness on the weekend following Epiphany. Well, the word Epiphany means to show or to make known or to reveal. And in our Western traditions and our Western churches, the day Epiphany, which was January 6th this year, signifies the visit of the wise men, the Magi, to the baby Jesus, to the Christ child. And by that visit, they revealed Jesus, this child, to the world as someone special, as someone extraordinary. The word epiphany, if you take away the capital E, also means a sudden, intuitive perception or insight into the reality or essential meaning of something, whatever that something is, usually initiated by some simple or commonplace occurrence or experience. Or another way of saying that, it's a comprehension or perception of reality. In other words, our reality changes by a sudden intuitive realization, as in I experienced an epiphany that changed how I saw the world. Now, I think this timing is interesting because Gretchen Rubin, the author of The Happiness Project, had an epiphany that inspired her to begin her journey and to write the book. She says this: one April day, on a morning just like every other morning, so already commonplace experience, I had a sudden realization, an epiphany. I was in danger of wasting my life. As I stared out the rain-spattered window of the city bus, I saw that the years were slipping by. What do I want from my life anyway? I asked myself. Well, I want to be happy. But I had never thought about what made me happy or how I might be happier. I wasn't depressed, and I wasn't having a midlife crisis, but I was suffering from midlife malaise, a recurrent sense of discontent and almost a feeling of disbelief. Can this be me? I'd wonder as I picked up the morning newspapers or sat down to read my email. Can this be me? Is this really it? But though at times I felt dissatisfied that something was missing, I also never forgot how fortunate I was, bogged down in petty complaints and passing crises, weary of struggling with my own nature, and boy, how many of us can relate to that. I too often failed to comprehend the splendor of what I had. I didn't want to keep taking these days for granted. The words of the writer Colette had haunted me for years. What a wonderful life I've had. I only wished I had realized it sooner. I didn't want to look back at the end of my life or after some great catastrophe and think, how happy I used to be then, if only I'd realized it. Gretchen had an epiphany, a sudden insight into the reality of her happiness level, initiated by a simple or commonplace occurrence. She had ridden that bus for years, hundreds of times, and yet looking out that window that day, something changed, something shifted. Here's the interesting thing about epiphanies. They're not just regular insights or even brilliant ideas. Okay, like the gym yard sale. Come on, that is a really good idea, don't you think? Okay. But it was not an epiphany, guys, okay? These are more, just as the definition said, a sudden intuitive perception. While they can be caused or happen during a commonplace experience, the epiphany is an internal change. It's an internal shift that causes us to literally see things differently and to see ourselves differently. Gretchen's need to look at her life and what happiness was or wasn't was revealed to her on that bus that day, just as the Magi's revealed Jesus' extraordinariness by their visit. She saw that she didn't want to get to the end of her life, look back, and see that, in fact, she had had a good life, a happy life, and didn't realize it. And it's interesting, she echoed the sentiment of T.S. Eliot, and I love this quote. For those of you who know that I love quotes, this is one of my favorites. What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. Well, isn't it interesting that Gretchen started her journey through happiness by looking at the end of her life and realizing that she didn't want to look back on it filled with regrets. So as divine order would have it, Mickey, thank you, recently posted a blog by a fellow coach, Rich Key, about a wonderful book by the author Bronnie Ware. This book is called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and it focuses on actual regret shared by those that she cared for while they were dying. So like Gretchen, we're going to begin our year of happiness by looking at what might happen at the end of our lives. So here's a small excerpt with my commentary from the book. Bronnie says, "For many years I worked in palliative care. My patients were those who had gone home to die. Some incredibly special times were shared. I was with them for the last 3 to 12 weeks of their lives. People grow a lot when they're faced with their own mortality. I learned never to underestimate someone's capacity for growth. Some changes were phenomenal. Each experienced a variety of emotions as expected: denial, fear, anger, remorse, more denial, and eventually acceptance. Every single patient found their peace before they departed, every one of them. When questioned about any regrets they had or anything they would have done differently, common themes surfaced again and again. Here are the most common 5 regrets. Regret number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. She says this was the most common regret of all. When people realize that their life is almost over and look back clearly on it, it is easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. Most people had not honored even half of their dreams and had to die knowing that it was due to choices they had made or had not made. So next week, we're going to look at Gretchen's 12 commandments. But as a teaser, the first regret is actually very consistent with Gretchen's first commandment. Be Gretchen. Or for our purposes, be ourselves. Don't live someone else's life based on someone else's expectations of who we are, or even worse, who we should be. Regret number 2, I wish I didn't work so hard. She said this came from every male patient that I nursed. They missed their children's youth and their partner's companionship. Women also spoke of this regret, but as most of her patients, she says, were from an older generation, many of the female patients at that time had not been breadwinners. All of the men I nursed deeply regretted spending so much of their lives on the treadmill of a work existence. By simplifying your lifestyle and making conscious choices along the way, it is possible to not need the income that you think you do. I can't wait to do the chapter on happiness and money. And by creating more space in your life, you become happier and more open to new opportunities and ones more suited to your new lifestyle. I so related to this one. I may not be a man from that older generation, although my dad is, but I am a woman who loves to work. I've worked my entire adult life, and I've had to look lately at whether my making a living has been to the exclusion of having a life. And I'll admit that last weekend's scare was a real wake-up call for both Ken and I. But what makes it hard, and I know that so many of you can relate to this, is that I love what I do. Everything that I do, teaching and preaching and coaching and loving and hugging and singing and praying. I love everything that I do. it doesn't feel like work. And it can still be all-consuming. I recently found a quote by Thomas Merton about happiness. Of course, be prepared for that. He says, happiness is not a matter of intensity, but of balance, order, rhythm, and harmony. I wonder if that applies to living without regrets as well. Simplify and make conscious choices. Sounds like that would take us well on our way to balance, order, rhythm, harmony, and happiness. Regret number 3, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings more. She says many people suppressed their feelings in order to keep peace with others. Now, I know no one in this room has ever done that, but take notes for a friend or relative. As a result, they settled for a mediocre existence and never became who they were truly capable of becoming. Many even developed illnesses relating to the bitterness and resentment they carried as a result. That was an ouch. One of the things I've learned through my own personal work and my own personal self-inquiry is that when I'm suppressing my feelings to keep peace, what I'm really doing is trying to protect myself or avoid the imagined reactions of others. Now notice I'm consciously using the word imagine because we really have no idea how people are going to respond or react to us. But we make up all sorts of stuff about it. And while that may seem to work in the moment, what it really does, remember Eye of the Storm, those of you who took it, is it creates separation. And it prevents us from having powerful, authentic relationships. And that is something we really will regret. Regret number 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends more. Bronnie writes, often they would not truly realize the benefits of old friends until their dying weeks, and then it wasn't always possible to track them down. Many had become so caught up in their own lives that they let golden friendships slip by over the years. There were many deep regrets about not giving friendships the time and effort that they deserved. Everyone misses their friends when they're dying. It is common for anyone in a busy lifestyle to let friendships slip. But when you are faced with your approaching death, the physical details of life fall away. People do want to get their financial affairs in order if possible, but it is not money or status that holds true importance for them. They want to get things in order for the people that they love. Usually, though, by this time, they are too ill and weary to even manage this task. It all comes down to love and relationships in the end. That is all that remains and matters in their final weeks. Love and relationships. And I don't think that needs any commentary. Number 5, I wish that I had let myself be happier. This is a surprisingly common regret. Many did not realize until the end that happiness is a choice. They had stayed stuck in old patterns and habits. The so-called comfort of familiarity had overflowed into their emotions as well as their physical lives. Fear of change had them pretending to others and to themselves that they were content, when deep within they long to laugh properly and have silliness in their lives again. So if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Good job. She finishes these regrets by saying, when you are on your deathbed, what others think of you is a long way from your mind. How wonderful to be able to let go and smile again, long before you are dying. Life is a choice. It is your choice. Choose consciously, choose wisely, choose honestly, and choose happiness. And that brings us full circle back to Gretchen on the bus. All these thoughts flooded through my mind, and as I sat on that crowded bus, I grasped two things. I wasn't as happy as I could be, and my life wasn't going to change unless I made it change. In that single moment, with that realization, I decided to dedicate a year to trying to be happier. And I didn't want to reject my life. I wanted to change my life without changing my life, by finding more happiness in my own kitchen. I knew I wouldn't discover happiness in a faraway place or in unusual circumstances. It was right here, right now, as in the haunting play, The Bluebird, where two children spend a year searching the world for the bluebird of happiness, only to find the bird waiting for them when they finally return home. We are going to dedicate a year not trying to be happier. We are going to dedicate a year being happier. Because what does Yoda say? There is no try, there is only do. So, we, One World Spiritual Center, are going to spend a year being happier. We're going to study happiness. We're going to explore happiness. We're going to engage in happiness. We're going to teach, read, eat, sleep, and drink happiness. And you know what I mean by that. Once a month, I had a couple of people say to me, oh no, does this mean you're not going to do any reel-to-reels this year? Yes. Once a month, we will explore happiness through a movie. Okay? For those of you who love those, this month's movie is going to be Up. One of the most powerful examples of letting go and choosing happiness I have ever seen on the big or small screen. So the end is where we begin. This year, together, let's help one another to create happy lives. So then when we look back over those lives, when we all near our inevitable time of transition from one plane of existence to another, that we can look back on our lives with no regrets. Life is a choice. It is your life. Choose consciously, choose wisely, choose honestly, and choose happiness. Let's take that into meditation, Debbie.